I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Some of my fondest memories as a child were sitting in front of the TV and waiting to hear those iconic words, recorded in front of a live studio audience. I don't know how to explain it, but whenever I heard those words, I knew I was in for a fond experience with my family. It was a phrase that always led to seeing them laugh and smile. Just hearing the titles of these shows sparked that feeling of nostalgia. Punky Brewster, Perfect Strangers, Cheers, Golden Girls, the list just goes on and on. But sadly, I feel like the golden age of the sitcom has passed. It seems like every year the phrase recorded in front of a live studio audience loses its potency. As the years have gone on, it's become obvious that sitcoms are seen as an outdated type of programming. Most people say that the magic is gone, and I can see their point. Many sitcoms are either not very good, or start out strong only to begin slowly deteriorating into garbage. The recent sitcoms I've loved have either been cancelled or taken that same deep dive into garbage. And it's a real shame. In some small way, each of these classic sitcoms has shaped my personality, but there is one sitcom in particular that had the biggest impact on my life. One which I hold responsible for my comedic inclinations, and which sits in my top 5 list of the best sitcoms of all time. Night Court. If you wanted an example of an ahead-of-its-time show, then Night Court is the perfect example. It was raunchy. It was full of insane characters. The plots could take bizarre directions that made you wonder what the writers were smoking, and I loved every minute of it. Even if you've never seen Night Court, you have felt its legacy, as its characters and humor have had a clear influence on modern TV comedy. Yet sadly, Night Court never got the recognition it deserved. And even worse, a whole generation has never even heard of the show that has become the foundation for TV comedy as we know it today. Well, that ends right now, because we are about to go on trial. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I will be presenting my case on how earth-shatteringly good this forgotten 80s sitcom really was, and how it still holds up today, in this episode of Gone, But Not Forgotten. Thanks for watching Gone But Not Forgotten. If you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now, like this video, and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. Now, back to the show. Night Court was created by comedy writer Reinhold Weege. Weege was a former reporter who was fired by the newspaper when he ticked off the advertisers, and then transitioned to Hollywood to begin his career as a writer for television. He wrote for MASH, then became a staff writer on Barney Miller, for which he eventually graduated and became a producer on the show. He then struck out on his own to create a new sitcom, and after his first attempt, Park Place, had failed, Weege was approached by NBC to create a courtroom comedy. But instead of trying to do a cleaned up version of a courtroom, Weege decided to spend some nights within the New York courts. At the time, there were a lot of stories of judges with emotional issues, who were very hard for the state to get off the bench. While he was there, Weege saw firsthand the insanity of the courts, through its mentally questionable judges, and soon became inspired with the idea of a wacky, young, and good-hearted judge. So thus the idea of Night Court was created. Weege pitched the show to... Aw man, here we go again. Yes, once again, Brandon Tartikoff. For those of you following along with this show, I've brought up many episodes where classic TV shows always lead back to Tartikoff, and it's getting a little annoying, because I've used up almost all the available pictures and videos of Tartikoff in these episodes. Anyway, Brandon Tartikoff gave the green light, and Night Court was born. So the show had to cast the most important role of Judge Harry T. Stone, the lovable, wacky judge who was a fan of singer Mel Tormé, and also a magician. Enter Harry Anderson, a comedian who happened to be a Mel Tormé fan, as well as a magician. Anderson had made a name for himself as a magician comedian, who pretty much exposed a lot of the hustles that fake magicians use to target tourists. He did this because he himself was a wannabe hustler. But as he stated,
I got my jaw broken at one point, realized that I I didn't have much of a future running a rough hustle.
Eventually, Harry was booked on SNL for a comedy act. Producer Jeff Melman saw him on SNL and knew that this was the perfect man for the role. It was like real-life magic. John Larroquette was cast as the slimy hornball assistant district attorney, Dan Fielding. Larroquette had been working at that point for a few years in television and film. He was best known at the time as the dull-witted Captain Stillman in Stripes, although horror fans would best recognize him as the narrator of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Larroquette was very dedicated to his craft, to the point that Harry Anderson said that Larroquette made him start to take acting seriously. He said that during the filming of the pilot, Larroquette flubbed a line and slammed his hand on a table. Anderson said he was shocked and thought Larroquette had broken his hand. When that happened, Anderson knew that he had to be equally committed to the craft. The one character written for a specific person was for the comedy writer Selma Diamond. At this point, Diamond was a legend in comedy, being one of the first female comedy writers who wrote for such comedy legends as Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca on their groundbreaking sketch show, Your Show of Shows. Diamond was reputed to have been the inspiration for the Sally Rogers character on The Dick Van Dyke Show. And on Night Court, she played the sarcastic bailiff Selma Hacker, who had some of the best lines of the show.
Your Honor, can I use some of the petty cash to buy food for those bathing beauties?
Sure. How are they getting along?
Well, as far as I can tell, on looks alone. I just hope they know that at 30, the party's over.
But the producers needed another bailiff to be the yin to Selma's yang. And that's when Bull Shannon was created. Bull was a kind giant who tended to inadvertently scare the crap out of people. He was particularly protective of Harry and Christine. He even liked Dan, but at certain points, he would turn him into a pretzel. The character of Bull was played by Richard Moll, who said that Bull's signature bald head was a coincidence since Moll had just finished filming a crappy sci-fi movie called Metal Storm: The Destruction of Jared Sin. For the role of that movie's villain, Hurok, Moll was forced to shave his head, and was still bald when he auditioned for Night Court. Reinhold was so impressed with him that when he offered Moll the part, he told him he had to keep his head bald. Moll replied back with, "Are you kidding? I'll shave my ass for this role if you want." The first season of Night Court was, well, crap. The characters we would later enjoy were either not there or were vastly different. The first season featured Karen Austin in the role of Harry's love interest court clerk, Laura Wagner. In the pilot, Laura is first shocked to meet Judge Harry Stone, as he is a young judge, something which was unheard of at the time. Reinhold originally wanted Markie Post for this role, but scheduling prevented Post from taking it. The best example of how bad the first season was is the second episode, which has a guest appearance from a baby Michael J. Fox. It was a Christmas episode where Michael plays a kid with a chip on his shoulder, and it is pretty bad. The plot involves a guy who believes that he's Santa and wants Harry to become the new Santa. It's just garbage, people. Pure and utter garbage. And the ratings for Night Court's first season were not great, but NBC slowly began to order more episodes. Some people have said it was because NBC had nothing else to air. And if that's true, then Reinhold Weege was very lucky, because it took a while for this show to find its way. The character of Dan is a perfect example of this. In the first season, he is completely different. Originally portrayed as a stuffy conservative jerk, he was a work in progress, much like the show itself. Larroquette and Reinhold eventually gelled in their sense of humor, which would result in Dan evolving into a sniveling, sex-crazed slimeball. The changes to the show's cast would soon become a regular occurrence. Karen Austin was eventually let go because she suffered from Bell's palsy, and the producers felt that it was hurting her performance. Paula Kelly, who had played public defender Liz Williams, was also removed. And I've got to agree with that choice, as she was pretty boring. She just did not mesh well with the show's humor, as she tried to play the character as a normal, real-life person. For Season 2, Reinhold again wanted Markie Post, and he got her, for one episode. Markie was contracted to be on the series The Fall Guy, and thus could not commit to the show. But you can immediately tell in this episode that the chemistry between Harry Anderson and Markie Post was incredible. But since she couldn't commit to the series, Ellie Foley was cast as new public defender Billy Young. Billy was feisty and good-natured, but her chemistry with Harry just wasn't there. As John Larroquette put it, the two were like brother and sister. Sadly, Season 2 also marked a more tragic cast change, as SELMA Diamond passed away at the end of the season. At the beginning of Season 3, she was replaced by Florence HALOP, who played Flo Kleiner. I really liked Flo. Yes, her character was a bit of a copy of Selma, but she had some awesome moments on this show. I originally started watching Night Court during Season 3, so Flo was my first bailiff. One of my favorite moments was in the two-part episode, The Hurricane. Its plot involves a hurricane causing a group of pregnant women to become trapped in the courtroom. Of course, all of them go into labor, and one of the couples has a soon-to-be father who acts like he's a tough guy. But then he passes out while his wife is in labor. This becomes a running gag of the episode that leads them to discover that she is having a breech birth. As Flo is reading the medical book trying to find out what that is, it leads to one of my favorite jokes of the episode.
Gently insert. Sit, Stanley.
Season 2 also introduced one of my favorite characters, Mac Robinson, played by Charles Robinson. Mac was the anchor of the show, who would keep everything in the court from going completely insane. But Mac also liked to play pranks on Dan. One of my favorite Mac moments was when he paid a guy to pretend to be the devil to scare the crap out of Dan. Mac was also one of the few characters on TV at the time who was in an interracial relationship. One great Mac episode was Here's to You, Mrs. Robinson, where Mac's wife Quan Lee gives birth to his daughter. It is one of the must-see episodes of the entire show. Finally, in Season 3, Markie Post joined the cast as perky, kind-hearted, and a bit naive public defender Christine Sullivan. This is when the show finally came together. Christine and Harry's chemistry was through the roof, and you just wanted them to be together. What was great about Christine is how sweet and kind she was. One of my favorite aspects of the character was her goofy sense of humor. A great moment was her attempt at making a joke about Dan when he's forced to wear a tuxedo.
Okay, I can say it now. Dan, you look like a big penguin.
She is to comedy what Roy Rogers is to comedy.
From here, the show just took off. The episodes were amazing, and they just seemed to top each other every week. NBC needed a show to follow Cheers, and once they moved Night Court to Thursday nights, the ratings began to soar, thus giving birth to the age of must-see TV. Thursday nights on NBC were now the juggernaut of television. Anything that aired on Thursdays on other networks were destroyed by NBC's lineup. The Emmys also started to pile in, to the point that John Larroquette actually asked the producers to stop submitting nominations after he had won 4 Emmys for the show. He said that he didn't want to stand out too much, so that he could eventually do other things after the show was over. One of the best features of Night Court was its comedy, and there are multiple factors to its sense of humor. Number 1, sight gags. These were very clever and creative.
Thank you. Hey, in the cafeteria, great. Mel, you're beautiful, I love you, never change. Don't let the geek in the penguin suit out of your sight.
Number 2, memorable characters. 2 of my favorites of the show were Bob and June Wheeler, a couple from West Virginia.
Sir, we're not from West Virginia.
You're not.
No, sir. We perjured ourselves.
And we lied, too.
Well, why did you pick West Virginia?
I don't know. It was just the first exotic place that popped into my head.
Funny story, Brent Spiner was offered a recurring role on the show between seasons. But then he was offered the role of Data on Star Trek The Next Generation. Good call on that one, Brent. Finally, number 3, pushing the envelope. Some of the jokes on this show are so raunchy, it still amazes me that they were able to make it on air. One of my favorite examples is when the guys sneak into a male strip club to spy on Christine and Roz.
Yeah, what has he got that I haven't got?
The final cast change happened in season 4, after Florence HALOP also sadly passed away. So a new bailiff was brought in, Roz Russell, played by comedian Marsha Warfield. Warfield was often teased by the cast of the show as being marked for death.
I wasn't really scared. I was sorry that 2 people had to die before I could get the job, but I'd have killed 4 or 5 more.
But I loved Roz. Her deadpan delivery was just awesome.
Channeling the negative, how to release your anger.
When Warfield joined the show, I felt that it had finally hit its prime. She just had great chemistry with the rest of the cast. It was during Roz's tenure that some of my favorite episodes aired, particularly a series of episodes that began with A Day in the Life, which was followed by Another Day in the Life, then yet another day in the life, and finally ending with Still Another Day in the Life. These 4 episodes all revolve around the characters trying to get through a huge amount of cases by midnight to reach some sort of goal. In one episode, the goal is to avoid a group of nuns from losing their orphanage before midnight. In another episode, it's to avoid a man from not being able to get to his fiancée before she marries another man. I think it's these episodes which are the perfect example of what Night Court is. And I especially love Dan in these episodes. They always feature him trying to chase some scheme before midnight. In one episode, Dan has to be free by midnight to have sex with a beautiful woman, leading to an amazing scene where Dan decides to read the defendant's case in order to have bumped into a higher court. But the information in the file is too long to read before midnight. Yet Dan somehow pulls off the impossible. I would love to play this clip, but YouTube won't let me. So take my word for it, if you look at the faces of the actors in this scene, those are genuine expressions of awe. I also love these episodes because it features my ultimate favorite moment of the series. It involves a mother suing a Dr. Seuss-like author for her child breaking its arm trying to imitate a character from one of his books.
But sir, the boy only climbed in the tree because of a drawing on page 33.
Your Honor, she hit the poor man with her shoe.
Well, you can see the spots clearly, bump 1 and bump 2. Well, I'm fining you 50, and that should be it.
Now get out of here, you dumb little
But for all of Night Court's amazing comedy episodes, there were times when it would pull on your heartstrings. The 2-part episode Wheel of Justice is an example of this. In this episode, Harry is forced to rule against a woman who was evicted from her apartment. The woman and her son are left with nothing and become homeless. Harry is racked with guilt when the son gets shot robbing a convenience store in order to get money for a hotel room, and Harry quits because of this. I thought it was a great example of showing how the law is not perfect, and how good people can suffer because of it. I know what you're thinking, duh, no shit. But for me as a 7-year-old, this at the time was a heartbreaking realization. Finally, I cannot talk about Night Court without mentioning the theme song, which was composed by the co-founder of the American Jazz Philharmonic, Jack Elliott. Elliott's theme song is so memorable that whenever I hear it, I still have to tap my foot to the beat. Just as important was the show's underlying devotion to Mel Tormé, who was very grateful to the show. Since Harry was a fan of Tormé and constantly talked about his music, Tormé claims that his career was rejuvenated as a result. In fact, when he passed away in 1999, it was Harry Anderson who gave a very moving eulogy at his funeral. Eventually, the party soon began to wind down for the show. Season 6 was Reinhold Weege's last year as a showrunner, as he was burned out by this point, and handed over the reins to new showrunners. Night Court would have at least one more good year on the air, in my opinion, but you could tell that everyone had wanted to move on. Everybody thought the show would end on season 8, but the network made the cast come back for a 9th season. This made the writers scramble to undo storylines in order to extend the show. What's even more frustrating was that the network wouldn't let them do a series finale, because they thought they could sell the show to another network or syndication. This plan didn't pan out, which left many Night Court fans with no satisfying send-off to our favorite characters. However, 17 years later, the show 30 Rock aired an episode that tried to give the fans of Night Court some closure by having Harry Anderson and Markie Post reunite to get married in a fake episode of Night Court. Interesting fact, John Larroquette was irritated that he was not asked to participate on this episode. The writers figured that he wouldn't be available at the time, so they never asked. But John said that had they asked, he would have made time. The worst part of the end of Night Court was the way that the cast was informed of the cancellation of the show. They showed up for work and received a memo saying that the show was canceled, and that they had until the rest of the day to gather their belongings, or they would be thrown out. Can you believe that? A show that helped cement the must-see TV block of programming on NBC. The show that won multiple Emmys, and you treat them like garbage? How could any network cancel a show in such an abrupt manner? It was so disrespectful. But at least we know that something like that could never happen again afterward. Oh, yeah. So should the show come back? Well, it will, as John Larroquette is leading the cast of an upcoming sequel series featuring Harry and Christine's daughter, played by Melissa Rauch. But since Harry Anderson, Markie Post, and Charles Robinson have all sadly passed on, we don't know if the magic is still gonna be there. I, for one, can only hope. Regardless of how Night Court ended or how it's going to continue, at least we all have those fond memories. Sadly, I cannot find anywhere to stream the show without paying for it. So if anyone out there knows where somebody can see it, then please post it in the comments below. Still, even if you have to pay to watch it, then I suggest you do, because Night Court will go on to be considered one of the top 10, if not top 5, greatest sitcoms of all time. And if you don't agree, then I object, because in my opinion, you're not going to find better laughs than the ones we had in that courtroom. Case closed.
People versus Becker, Weissman, Rogers, and Evans, performing in a public place without a permit.
How you plead?
Don't we plead guilty?
Guilty. We know we're guilty. Oh, yes, we did it. So now we're guilty. Oh, yes,
They confessed their guilt. They told no lies. But oh, how they can harmonize. That's a $25 fine, but I'm gonna suspend it.
Oh, I'm just wild about Harry.
I'm Jesse Shade, speaking on behalf of David Arroyo for JoBlo.com, and thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content, and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We're an independent company that appreciates all of your support, and we will see you next time for the next installment of Gone But Not Forgotten.